I would say that perfectionism really stems from like a fear. You're afraid of losing control, afraid of the thing you make, which people are going to use, not measuring up in some way.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Not a Minimum Viable podcast. Today, we're joined by Hussam, a product builder quietly building products at the edge in FinTech and AI. He helped launch Canada's first Bitcoin cashback Visa card at ShakePay, and now builds AI tools for transactional lawyers at Spellbook, where he works across product, design, and code. When he's not talking to his computer in Cursor, he's drumming, coding app ideas, or hosting walk-in talks for Toronto's creative tech scene. Welcome to the podcast, Hussam. How are you?
Hey, happy to be here. Appreciate you setting this up.
Wait, so Hussam, you and I have never met before, but I understand you and Rudy have met before, and I'm assuming it's through one of the Toronto tech scene events, like either new builds or new demos or something. I'm curious to hear what it was.
Yeah, not exactly. We actually met at we met over a sort of like this fitness challenge that happened last summer. And it was hosted by the Futureland team. And we were all in like this group chat together, basically competing for who could, yeah, just commit to the most hours exercised over the course of like a month or something like that. I can't remember the exact details, but yeah, Rudy and I were competing. We were on opposite teams, and it got pretty heated at one point, and it was all in good fun. But yeah, I got to know Rudy through that, and then we met at a bunch of events throughout the city, and it's been really cool to just kind of see his journey and the stuff he's been working on, and we just figured it would make sense to jump on the podcast and have a chat.
Speaking of journeys,
Totally.
I'd also want to hear, like, where did we find you today? What has brought you to this podcast? And I just want to know what your journey's been like so far. Now you're at Spellbook and your past ventures, the work you've done, why
Yeah.
specifically Spellbook today? Like, what has that been like for you?
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, I feel like there's a lot to kind of unpack around how I ended up here and why I've been working on the things I've been working on. But I would say, the thing that got me to Spellbook was really in the last year, seeing the kind of like the gravity and the innovation and just the like the movement that was happening around AI and the technology that was being developed there and the companies that were building in that space, and me just kind of recognizing like I wanted to be a part of that I wanted to really kick off like a new chapter in my career working in that space and getting better at building AI products. And yeah, there's kind of an interesting story, like how I specifically ended up working at Spellbook, but uh, I actually connected with the founder over Twitter, Scott. Uh, we both had a conversation, and was kind of just like really intrigued at this idea of like a cursor for lawyers. So we started talking about that and had a bunch of conversations. I met folks on the team and a lot of really smart people on the team, and I just kind of knew that this was a great place to kick off kind of like this new chapter in my kind of product career, if you want to call it that. And yeah, that's where I've been for the past just over a year, and still learning a lot. And yeah, it's been great.
So at Spellbook, you're building AI tools for lawyers, to put it
Yeah.
at a very high level, right?
Yep.
From my understanding, isn't this whole law industry a notoriously very traditional industry? How are you then
Yeah.
approaching AI-based product development for users who might be skeptical of adopting these new technologies in the first place?
It's a good question. The way that things have been kind of progressing in that space is that, the technology is here. It is creating measurable, a measurable and valuable impact to their work. It's helping them to be more efficient. It's helping them to, free up some of their time so that they can tackle some of the more perhaps like complex and meaty, matters that they tend to deal with. And it's helping them automate a lot of tasks that, you perhaps couldn't automate in the past. And so I think there's this kind of recognition that like the technology is here, it's not going away, it's going to get better. it is valuable, and we need to adapt. And in some ways, I think like the legal industry has been a bit reluctant to adopt new technologies unless they create that kind of like measurable impact for their workflow. And so that's why, I mean, the kind of, typical example you see here is like, lawyers basically like live in Microsoft Word, right? And so it's either that or Outlook and email and things like that. And so, one thing that I think Spellbook has done really well at trying to bridge that gap is basically to like meet lawyers where they are by building a kind of like add-in for Microsoft Word. And so when they're opening up a document, they're reviewing a contract, they have the Spellbook add-in right there in the same context around how they typically work with a document. And we're able to then like bake in these tools that work within that environment as opposed to forcing them to adopt something that they're just not used to and they don't care to adopt. And so I think it's a combination of lawyers again kind of recognizing that there is value, they can adopt these tools in a way that they are still in the driver's seat. They are steering the tools into driving kind of the outcome that they need and the documents they're working on, but also building tools that also feel like intuitive and don't force these lawyers to like adopt something that they have to pick up from complete scratch. uh, and yeah, I think that's kind of how I would classify that.
And how are you measuring the metrics that are determining whether or not your product is actually bringing value to these lawyers? Because for something like tech, for example, you can easily look at like number of lines that AI has written, number of git commits, for example. How does that translate over to law?
Yeah, I would say the like one of several metrics that we typically track and just like try to keep in the back of our minds is the the acceptance of a suggestion. Like we know we're doing a good job, and that the customer is arriving at a value moment if they summon Spellbook for some task, they ask it to review a contract, we highlight a bunch of suggestions based on what we think is critical to address in like the gaps in a contract, let's say, and that lawyer, that user then goes in and inserts that suggestion or maybe modifies it a little bit, tweaks it to their liking, and then inserts it. I think there are a lot of other like dimensions to the way we think about this, but I think ultimately it's like, are they engaging with the product? Are they drafting new language? Are they reviewing the contracts on a regular basis? And then are they ultimately like actioning on the things we are suggesting for the documents they're looking at?
One thing I found interesting you were just talking about earlier was how you're meeting the lawyers in their natural environment, essentially, right? And I
Right.
think there's, from what I hear as a non-programming person, there's tools like that for builders as well now, like Cursor being one example. And I was
100%.
reading your article on Twitter where you were detailing your pile workflow. And something I want to quote is one of the biggest learnings for me is that programming is a mindset. You have to approach problems with a level of specificity I'm not used to. I make a lot of implicit
Mhm.
assumptions around how the code needs to work, but I didn't realize the extent to which you have to explicitly state things in the code. So this is super
Yeah.
interesting to me because assumptions are a contentious point, whether it's in economics or it's in investment banking, so on and so forth, right? How
Mhm.
or when did you realize that challenging these maybe implicit biases or system one thinking in your process is important? When did
What are
you
you referring
realize
to?
that going into a learning process with these implicit biases might not be
Yeah.
conducive to your learning?
Yeah. I think in the example that you brought up with that project that I was working on, like I think I realized very quickly in trying to tackle like different software projects, the vibe coding projects that I've been working on. I realized very quickly that like if I didn't get super specific about what I wanted to build, um, and I think like as a product manager, like this is something that it's a muscle that I try to flex daily because I work with engineers and I don't know, I do the kind of typical PM work, you might say, of, you know, crafting PRDs and user stories and things like that. And so I think there's a sense of like I understand the importance of being specific and clear and articulating things like that. But when I started getting into code and in Cursor and like vibe coding, and you're doing a lot of prompting, and maybe sometimes you get lazy and you ask a kind of broad question or give broad instructions, or maybe you kind of you think that you know what it is that you want an LLM to build for you, but you haven't really like discreetly thought about the building blocks that can make that work. Like you very quickly hit like a brick wall basically, and you struggle to kind of make progress. And so I think like getting into these kind of coding projects and Cursor really gave me an appreciation for that like systems level thinking. And I think intuitively I kind of get how to think in that way just because like I studied engineering as well, and I kind of have this engineer's brain to some extent. But being in the code gave me a much greater appreciation for that. And there's a guy good friend of mine in Toronto, you know, Rudy probably knows of him, I'd imagine, but his name's Ahmed Saleh. He's a founder at this startup called founder of the startup called Falcon, and Ahmed and I are also doing a podcast. Funny enough, um, and one of the things Ahmed said to me that like really stood out to me was like um, there's like the product design and engineering infinity stones. They're like a trifecta, and so the more of these stones that you collect, the more of a like really clear, well-rounded view you have of the system you're building. And I was in product land for so long that when I went into code and now in the past year into design, I just feel like I have this like really complete picture that um, really lends itself quite well to this like systems level thinking that you touched on here. Does that make sense? I'm kind of going on a few tangents, but
I think it makes sense. I think it's important to think about your process in different ways, and you coming from an engineering background, I think allowing you to break down things when you're thinking about them, I think that's good, because a lot of people in different fields have to unlearn the fact that when they're going into a problem solving situation, they don't realize they already have a few layers of assumptions going in. And when you check that, you're like,
100%.
oh, you said this happens just because, right? But why does that happen? We're taking that for granted. You're assuming that's the
Yep.
case. And you have to kind of like
Yep.
start right from scratch and think about that process again. So I think that's pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Like one of the things that I have recently started doing just in my projects, I know there's like this very typical workflow of like, when you're working in Cursor, you try to write a PRD and then you try to create tasks from the PRD and whatever. I think one question I usually throw back at the LLM is like, what assumptions am I making in how I think, this thing needs to be built, or um, what are some like hidden gaps that maybe I haven't actually thought through and that I actually need to consider in the solution. And so you'll notice that like it's kind of like this like onion that you have to keep peeling back, layers from. And I feel like it is a muscle that you just get better at building over time.
There's this idea that you mentioned in your podcast about how there's two different approaches to working with Cursor. One is you just ask it to do things for you, and the other is to really break it down and understand everything line by line. You
Yeah.
mentioned that you're sort of reverse engineering this code line by line and flooding it with comments so that you're developing a personalized and unique understanding until
Yep.
you hit this aha moment.
Yep.
What is it about this level of deep understanding that compels you to do all this? Is it control? Is it curiosity? What is it?
I love that you said control. I think that's great. It's probably a bit of control, probably a bit of like obsessive, behavior on my part. But like definitely curiosity. Like I'm just that kind of person sometimes where like when I just get obsessed about something, I feel like I want to learn and I want to know more. And I think like particular project that I decided to kind of study, which was Udara's Pile project, is like I just had the confidence that he had some really like opinionated. Um, he put a lot of thought into how it was built, and I had the confidence that if I studied it, I was going to pick up some interesting like design patterns and maybe sharpen that kind of systems thinking that I talked about earlier. And so I got really curious, and as I was going through stuff line by line and making these like connections between particular files, it just kind of made sense to me like why I don't know, like some of these concepts were quite new to me, like separation of concerns, like creating, specific like utility functions that you then tuck away in a separate file and they become modular and reusable and then you can reference them in other files um, and then I could start to see that engineering logic in the code as well, and so that was kind of like intuitive to me, and I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And then you can imagine somebody like me who has never been that deep in the code as a product manager, um, you know, basically like looking under the hood for the first time in a very long time and being like, oh, like this particular thing that I thought was like super easy or super straightforward to make, it relies on the construction of like specific functions, and these files have to connect together in this way, and it's all in order to do this like really simple thing. And it kind of goes back to like the assumptions piece you were talking about, where like I maybe had preconceived notions of like how things were supposed to work. And so yeah, getting into the code was just like a really fun exercise for me. I was learning a lot, and I found that I actually enjoy it. I enjoy it. So
I have a sort of a follow up to this because there's a
yeah, yeah,
school of thought generally that talks about systems and understanding systems where you don't necessarily have to look under the hood and understand how the system was built or how
true.
each moving piece is operating to understand how it behaves and to sort of build on that. But when you're talking about breaking something down and maybe coming from an engineering perspective, that is the natural inclination. Do you think this is because you're trying to learn how that system was built or how it's working so that you can replicate that or recreate that in some way? Or is it because you yourself fundamentally are someone who understands the whole through its parts?
I think in the case of this project, it was definitely like the former. Like I wanted to try and understand how Pile was built in order to try to work on my own project, right? And see if there were certain patterns or like building blocks that I could try to recreate myself. But I think like in the process of doing that, I also found that it just gave me more of an appreciation and perhaps even a little bit of like an awareness of the hidden complexity of software. And that's something that like I'm able to take with me both at work and on my personal projects. And I just kind of was like, this is awesome. Like this is fun. So
One thing I've noticed about products like Cursor is that they make it really easy to ship fast. And
mm,
especially in startup environments, shipping fast and iterating is key. But one thing I want to point out is something you've mentioned previously before in your own podcast, is you
okay.
mentioned this idea of you being a perfectionist. I'm interested to know, how are you balancing your innate perfectionist tendencies with this need to ship fast and iterate in the startup environment that you're working in? How are you dealing with this trade off? And has there ever been a time where this perfectionism has held you back versus when it may have like propelled you forward?
Yeah. No, great question. The answer is yes. I mean, for sure. Like the perfectionism can has like it has absolutely held me back sometimes, and I think that I'm learning as I get older to develop a sensitivity to this and to know when to basically switch that part of my brain off to some extent and optimize for just speed instead. And I think like it's funny, I was having a conversation earlier this week just about like perfectionism in the design process. Like when I'm trying to come up with a concept or an idea for something, and finding that like overcoming that initial friction is a bit challenging. you know? And so of just like designing a concept, getting it out of my head and working through different iterations for it. And what I found is like speed is usually a really useful antidote. It sounds obvious, but like when you really feel speed at work in the way that you like are iterating on a design, you're iterating on a solution, you're giving yourself like a time box or like a constraint where you're saying, I need to come up with something in X period of time. And one thing in particular that I've really found is like, especially when I'm designing, I've seen that the faster I iterate, usually the better the outcomes are, and the more likely I am to arrive at a design that I really feel like is a kind of, I don't want to say perfect, but it's like um, a good conclusion that covers enough ground in order for it to be impactful and useful for the person I'm designing for. And so I don't know that I'm necessarily answering your question here, but it's a balancing act for me for sure. And I feel like it's a matter of maybe just like turning it on and turning it off at the right moments in time as I'm shipping product, where maybe the initial scrappiness to just come up with a concept early is, you know, ditch the perfectionism, speed first. And then as you get closer to like that last 15% is where you kind of give yourself this permission to polish something up and package it in a way that you feel, you know, meets your bar of quality, whatever that is. So it's difficult, but I try.
And how did you come about or come around to developing this sort of self awareness of being able to know when to turn off that perfectionist attitude to focus on iterating?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just something that like I've just become aware of over time. And in specific like situations, I've just had to learn the hard way that like a perfectionistic approach to specific parts of the process is sometimes like a detriment to the process. Oftentimes, I would say it's a detriment to the process because like I think if I'm getting a little bit, if I'm peeling some layers deeper here, we're getting, deeper into the psyche a little bit. I would say that like sometimes like I think perfectionism really stems from like a fear. You're afraid of losing control. You're afraid of the thing you make, which people are going to use, not measuring up in some way. You're afraid of maybe judgment. You're afraid of being. I mean, you guys are shipping a podcast like new episode every week, every couple of weeks. You're putting the reps in, right? But I think there are a lot of people that struggle to put a first, second, third episode out, whatever. So it's usually that fear of exposure. And so I think for me, it's just tuning into that and recognizing that like, hey, like what am I trying to control here? What outcome am I trying to avoid? Um, and I feel like that usually helps me to think through that and work through it.
I'm wondering now, does this also translate to skills more broadly when you're picking up new skills or you're learning something for the first time or you're new at something, right? Do you
Hmm.
still have that voice in your head at one point going like, okay, you're good enough, you can ditch the perfectionism, apply this and move on to something else? Or are you there like, oh, I need to be better, 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 best at this at some point? I'm wondering what that dialogue looks like.
Yeah. I would say a little bit. I mean, like I've always been the kind of person that like I have a lot of interests, which I guess is probably why I ended up being, working in product. Because I mean, I kind of like I love to just have this holistic view of things, and I think generally I love the idea of mastering a craft. Being like the top of the game in a particular thing. Um, but I think sometimes what I really naturally ease into is doing a lot, trying a lot of things, and getting good enough at a lot of things, being really T-shaped in that way. Um, and so I would say I would say, yeah, like it can apply to a lot of things, but yeah, sorry. I kind of lost track of the question there, but I feel like I feel like I'm on track, maybe.
No, I think that was good enough. I think that was pretty clear.
Cool,
Once
cool, cool.
again, we don't need to be perfectionists with these. It's just a
Yes,
conversation.
there you go.
One pattern I've noticed with the things that you've said is that you're very open to risk and risk taking in general. And
Mm,
I see that being reflected in some of your earlier career moves as well. Some of the moves that you've taken, leaving well-established companies for early stage startups, jumping into crypto when it was still niche.
yeah.
These are risky moves that probably looked crazy from the outside. How did you explain these decisions to friends and family who might not have gotten it at that point?
Oh, friends and family. I mean, I don't really recall ever being in a situation where I've had to like over explain or justify the things that I'm doing. To be honest, like I think what I've tried to do in my career is just like let my intuition guide me and use my curiosity as a compass. So I would mark like the first I would mark one of the major chunks of my career that took place around like 2017 when I got like really obsessed with the crypto space. And that same obsession that maybe, you've Rudy, you've seen in like my writing and the things I talk about with Cursor and whatever, like I also had that kind of similar level of interest and obsession with that space. And um, you know, reading white papers all the time about different, at the time, like blockchain networks that were spinning up for different use cases, trying to understand what the technology is and how it works. And um, I think that intuition and that like approach to my career has like served me quite well. And to your point, like there's been definitely a lot of risk, but I don't know. I guess I've tried not to think about the risk too much and to just use those two things as a guide. Uh, and I'm happy to like dig into maybe like specific examples there. But
I'm wondering what your relationship with risk in general looks like, and if it's you said that you weren't really thinking about the risk as much maybe in that situation, and I'm curious,
mhm.
is that the obsession driving that, where it's like you can overlook that because of this obsessive curiosity in the thing that you're pursuing, or do you think it's like intentional to be like, oh, if I think about the risk too much it might hinder me, and you make that choice?
Yeah, I wouldn't say um, like thinking too much about the risk would hinder me or has hindered me in the past. Like it's definitely been something that I try to think very deeply about particular decisions that I'm trying to make, that may have a non-negligible impact on my life. Uh, but I think one thing that I've just learned about myself, which is and to me, like it's really hard for me to separate my like work and personal life, if that makes sense. Like I don't see work as a thing that I show up and just do, and then I can kind of like compartmentalize it from other aspects of my life. And I don't mean this to say that, I'm a, crazy workaholic or anything like that. But what I'm trying to get at is that it's very important for me that I'm doing something that I'm that energizes me and that I feel like I'm learning and going in that direction rather than trying to follow a particular like planned path or trying to, make sure that things are by the book or look good on paper. I think that is what has driven me um, to make certain decisions like that. And to your point, like on the risk topic, like there have been several moments in my career where, you know, I basically was, you know, comfortable diving into the unknown without having, let's say, like another job lined up or something like that, or maybe trying my own thing for like a year or whatever, different arrangements, different types of work. And I think that there's something to that idea of like being comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm trying to continue to expose myself to. I'm not always open to that. It still scares me, but I think I feel like I have a higher tolerance to that than probably like I'm not saying this to brag or anything, but it's probably just like a higher tolerance to that than maybe the average person. So,
And when you're thinking of career moves like this, right, and the risk taking is coming into the equation, the curiosity is
mhm.
coming into the equation, how far along the horizon usually are you looking? And I ask this specifically because um, McKinsey has this structure to thinking about new technologies or long term goals, right, where they talk about it in horizon one, two, and three, where one is the immediate, it is the current business, and horizon three is
Mhm.
something so far along the horizon that maybe most capital sources don't even see the value in that business yet. So, as somebody looking for work opportunities or thinking about your next moves along the process, how far along the horizon do you think you usually look for it?
I wouldn't say that there's like some calculated, conversation I'm having where, oh, I think in 10 years AI is going to be this. I need to be, in AI right now, or say, anything similar to that in crypto. I think it really just came down to like, wow, this technology is really cool. I'm really interested in this technology. I think it is both having an impact currently. It has a lot of potential, and I can see a path where this thing can really like change the world or help people. You know what I mean? And I want to be a part of that process. And I think for me, at least back then with crypto, like one of the things that really excited me about the space was like it was a very mission driven space. So it was all about like giving you control of your money, helping you be financially self-sovereign, um, this technology that allowed people to transfer value in a permissionless way. And ultimately, like, especially the narrative with, for example, Bitcoin over the years has really strengthened is like, oh, it's this like hedge against inflation. And so to me, I was like, wow, this is powerful stuff. Like if you talk to somebody in a developing country, like they might actually be able to tangibly benefit from this, and that's a mission I can get behind. I'm excited about that. So to me, it's very much so like I would say possibly even more of a spiritual game in deciding where I want to go, as opposed to this kind of like rational, like, oh, in 5, 10 years it's going to be this or that.
I'm interested to know what the role of the founder is in you making this decision, because I don't think it's uncommon for people to join a an exciting startup after being dazzled by the salesman that is the founder, only find out that that founder is not as great of a leader or a collaborator.
Hmm.
So how much importance does that founder come into play? Like, how do I phrase this?
And
Uh,
joining, when you say the context being like joining an early stage
yeah,
company, like what weight does the founder carry in my
exactly.
decision, right? Yeah. Um, I think it's really important, to be honest with you. I've if you look at, my LinkedIn or something, like the companies I've worked at, I have worked in the early stage and Series A um, kind of stage of companies pretty much since like 2016 or something. Like I'm an early stage guy, and I think in those environments, depending on the stage, of course, like seed, like I've worked at I've worked at a company in the seed phase where like it just died, like it just didn't work out. And so um, uh, like I think there are some very real risks to joining uh, a startup at that stage. And I think like in that size of a company, in a company like that is at its infancy, like you need to trust the founder. You need to have trust in their vision and in their competence and in their leadership, to your point. And then more importantly, it's like, they are the representation of what the rest of the culture will ultimately trickle down and look like throughout the company. They're going to be hiring people based on, you know, values that they think are worth optimizing for in the hiring process. And so, I think if you connect with them and vice versa, like there's a real kind of, sense that you can work well together and you trust, and there's some trust there in that like leadership and vision, then I think I would weigh that quite heavily, to be honest, because I think you are effectively, like, one way I would phrase this, just to make my kind of final point here, is like when you join I've learned that when you join a company at the early stage like this, like, you are, as an employee, effectively playing the role of a VC. And instead of the currency being your money, it's your time. It's the risk that you are taking to join this company when you could be at another organization, maybe that's more mature, maybe that you can learn a different set of skills from, right? And so, um, you know, as a when you think about it in that context, it's like, am I willing to bet on this founder? Am I willing to bet on this vision? And I think if you even have like the slightest bit of hesitation, then it doesn't make sense, because usually, there is a risk that these companies don't take off, and, they plateau or they die, or, in some cases, you are also taking on like founder level risk to join a startup, um, and, not have the kind of compensation or the like upside that can support that risk. And it'll depend on the stage you're at in your career around whether or not to take that leap of faith, right?
I think another aspect that I found interesting of that, the way you described that process was when you're at these early stage companies, you can probably see all the moving parts inside the whole. And I was
Yeah,
thinking about what we were talking about earlier as well, right? Because I feel sometimes in multinational corporations or in big companies, you kind of lose sight of what all the
yeah,
different moving parts are like. And I think that's a underrated part of the experience of working at early stage companies, is that you're being exposed to so much more in so much more detail at the
yeah.
working level of these processes. Did it help you learn or pick up things that you didn't expect you would be learning or being exposed to going into projects or ventures like this?
100%. Yeah. I remember the first like really early stage company I joined was in I think it was 2018, or 2019, I forget. It's called Lake Finance. So it was like um, it was sort of like this product studio, and we were building some kind of different platforms and tools for decentralized finance. And I remember at the time, I had this like background in mostly doing like business development and like sales, so like a lot of customer facing stuff. But I was really frustrated with like, I want to, like, I'm an engineer, man. Like I want to solve problems. I want to build things, right? And I remember joining the startup. Like I hit it off with the founder, and we decided to start working together. And I think it was like my first day or something. And I was like, "Hey, man, like, what's my role? Like, what am I doing at this company? Like, what am I working on? Like, what's my title?" And he was like, I think you're the growth guy. You're gonna be the growth guy. I'm like, okay, whatever. What I don't know what that means, but okay, I'm the growth guy. And you know, in that role, in that environment, I got to I got to do so many things that I had never done previously. You know, all the way from like maybe more operational things, like, from operations to finance to like marketing to helping out with the product strategy at the time, like just starting to get my feet wet with product. But uh, yeah, I think when you work at like a team that's that small, you have the luxury of being able to just like, who's doing that thing? Oh, nobody? Okay, just go do it. Like, just it's like it is permissionless in that way. You have autonomy, and they reward that. They reward that level of agency. And so if you're that kind of person that naturally you're just like, oh, why isn't that thing being done? Well, oh, okay, I feel like I can learn that thing, and I'm just gonna do it. And That's what I love about it. So
Has this exposure to these different things across the spectrum bled into some of the product principles that you're working with now? Has it influenced essentially the way that you approach product?
I would say a bit, and I would say, yeah, I would say so. I would I would add that like whether or not it is entirely practical is one thing, but whether or not I enjoy it is another. And so what I'll say is like I really enjoy having that breadth that we talked about and wearing multiple hats and getting a full sense of the picture around what it takes to ship product. So, for example, in my role right now at Spellbook, like we have like our product team consists of myself and I'm our product lead, and the engineering team, and together we make up the product team. And both myself and my manager are not only PMs for our products, but we also are designers. So I essentially I carry out both roles at the company. And lately, I've also been trying to adapt in the way that I work and the way that I build and design features with my engineering team by using tools that allow me to get into the code more. So maybe I'm like prototyping in Cursor, I'm doing some stuff in V0, and then my job isn't done. Like when I help to ship a feature, like shipping isn't just like let's put it behind a feature flag and turn it on or something. It's like no, like what's the story? How are we taking this product to market? Like who is it speaking to? And then let's like build those assets, tell that story, and sell it. And then of course all the other stuff that comes from it downstream of like, is this doing well? Is it being used? How do we improve it? And so you can see like I think that holistic view of what it takes to ship a product and get it in somebody's hands, like I really value having insight and involvement in each of those steps or components of it. So I would say it absolutely has like influenced how I work and do product.
And I think, like you mentioned, thinking about the story, I think that's a really crucial part that kind of just transcends
Yeah.
job function, regardless of where you are, what industry you're in, and
Yeah.
keeping in mind what the core story of your product is. And is that just as important? I would imagine more important when you're maybe the first or one of the first people to join the team in a product capacity, wherever you are. Does it help if, say, you have a cold start problem or you don't know where the product needs to start, right? Keeping that story in mind, how important is it to have that sorted out beforehand? And is it set in stone at that point, or is that also subject to change, like when you're iterating and you're, maybe pivoting in the future? How important is that core story?
I think it's really important, to be honest. I think and I don't even want to, I'm not even saying it's important because of this like, debate of like, distribution or product, like which wins, it's not, um, that's not where I'm coming from. I'm just coming from more like, why should people care about this, you know? And um, I think there is something really, really useful in just getting better at figuring that out and then learning how to articulate that in a way that will resonate with people. And it's a skill I want to get better at. It's a skill that I think a lot of us are trying to get better at with work and different projects. I mean, Twitter is a great place for that because you're basically, if you tweet something and it takes off, it means, you hit the zeitgeist, you hit the pulse, right? Like, you told a story, whatever that is, even if it's like a sentence or something, and it resonates with people and they retweet it and whatever. So I think not only is that something that is really important to like build as a skill, but to your point, I think it's like it can be a moving target. It's shifting, it's changing. You have to be flexible and you have to, I guess you just have to like adapt, like if a story doesn't resonate, like move on and try something else and see what sticks.
Let's take this moment and hard pivot a bit. And could
Yep.
you tell us a bit more about the inspiration behind your walk and talks? Why did
Yeah.
these walks start in the first place? Were you like hoping to create something that wasn't already happening in Toronto?
Yeah. The walk and talk started like a year and a half ago at this point almost, which is kind of crazy. But the inspiration for that came from just a general feeling of like disconnect with the city. Like I just felt like there weren't opportunities for um, me to meet like-minded people and for me to connect with others in the community. And the community wasn't, I wouldn't even say like I put some asterisks behind like the idea of a community because it was like very early back then and there wasn't much going on. And so it started off as just like, hey, I'm gonna go on a walk with Tommy Trin was my co-host at the time, and we just both decided like, hey man, you want to do this? Let's try this thing. And we like tweeted about it, and we got, I think it was like 8 people to join us on the first one, and then it just we just kept doing it. Just kind of like how you guys are doing your podcasts. I think we just kept doing it, and it was a fun thing. And I'm actually doing another one. I guess if depending on when this podcast goes live, I'm doing one this Saturday, um, which is it's been a while, so it'll be fun.
And I'm also curious because this is something we talk a lot about on the podcast specifically. I think that was one of the core
Yeah,
ideation points when we started this was learning more about how the Toronto tech scene is actually conducive to building in the city and promoting innovation or promoting new ideas, right? Or if it
yeah.
is for you. So I want to know how important has this space been for you as a builder or somebody curious about new technologies or wanting to build things, and third spaces are something that's come up a lot. Was that a core point for
Mhm.
you as well? Just like you said, feeling a disconnect with the city. Have the events in the tech scene in general yours, but also the things other people are doing, like we talked about new demos or the fitness challenge. Have things
Yeah,
like these really contributed to your experience in the Toronto tech ecosystem?
yeah, I'd definitely say so. I mean, where things were at like a year and a half ago compared to where they are now, and it's a night and day difference. One thing I didn't expect that was going to come out of just being involved with community stuff and hosting events and attending events and stuff like that. Like I didn't expect that I would make friends, to be honest with you. Like I've made a lot of friends in the last year and a half, and these friends are also people that I admire and I respect and I learn from. And I think there's this kind of like shallow concept of like a community sometimes where like, oh, community is like, you just attending a bunch of events and there being events happening and whatever. But I think um, what's more important is that you can be in an environment where you can like actually establish real relationships with people. And turns out there are a lot of really smart people in the city and they're working on some really, really cool stuff, man. So, uh, I would have probably never had the opportunity to meet these people if all this stuff didn't happen and I didn't get out of my uh, shell and try things. And then I think third spaces, I guess an example would be like New Stadium or 535 Studio 535. I think these spaces are great. I think they are needed to support people like you guys that um, want to host events, want to bring people together, want to um, promote things in the community because Toronto punches above its weight ultimately. Like we can be, I think we're not loud, we're not brash about it, but there's a lot of talent here, and I think it's great that you guys are highlighting it, and third spaces can do that as well.
And is there a particular reason that these Saturday walks are geared towards techno creatives in Toronto? Is it just to bring like-minded people in these fields together, or is this intersection something that just comes naturally to you because of your work in product across these like various domains?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just I really wanted this to be like a gathering that would promote really interesting conversation. And, I'm a creative technologist or techno creative, whatever you want to call it. And I figured, hey, this is like a good flag to plant and to say, hey, if you feel the same, you identify in a similar way, you know, come on over and let's get to know each other. And um, I think it would be cool to have more like unconventionally creative people um, join walks like this. Like I'm a musician, like I play the drums. I'd love to have, I don't know, more musicians or people experimenting with different technologies or mediums or, whatever you want to call it. Join walks like this or attend events like this. And you know, one thing I will touch on just with the topic of music and why it's relevant for this is like lately I have been also exploring the music scene in Toronto, and I've been getting to know really talented musicians here, and I've been attending live shows, um, and I've also realized that Toronto has a crazy amount of musical talent. And so if you think about it, it's like we have really strong um, technology talent. We also have really talented musicians. Like there are different pockets of the creative scene that I think are untapped, and it would be really special if there are more ways to bring people in together from those different disciplines, And I think like the new stadium guys are trying to do more of that. Shout out Vin and Tommy and Vince. So hopefully we get more of that.
Also, shout out Omar and Sudden Sounds. We had
Yes.
Omar on our podcast a couple of episodes ago.
Oh no way, nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was definitely a great episode to check out. That was something I did not expect. Um, Either going into it, the level of intensity with which he cares about the music and like what he's
Yeah.
done to promote that scene as well. It's so cool to see.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's super talented.
this brings us to a segment that we do with all of our guests. We call them rapid fire questions. They're not really rapid, so feel free to think about them. And I'll edit it so it seems like you were super quick with your answers anyway. Okay, so my first question is, what is your go-to comfort meal after a long work day?
Oh man. Go-to comfort meal. Ah, I can't help it, man. Burger and fries. Cheeseburger and fries. Um,
Do you have like a preferred fast food place for that?
if you follow, like you'll notice on Twitter that I'm occasionally subtweeting about burgers and fries and different burger spots in the city. I would say my favorite right now is I gotta go with Burger Drops. Shout out Burger Drops. They're so good, delicious. Um, and the owners are just like the nicest people. They're really great. Highly recommend.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, next question. Would you rather spend a day at a cabin in the woods coding by yourself or hosting a walk and talk in the woods?
Probably coding. I mean, a cabin in the woods, that sounds lovely. That sounds really nice. I'd be in nature. I could do one-on-one walk and talks with Claude, you know, or just me, myself, and I, and then get back to vibe stressing after. So works out.
What is the most random thing you've ever built just for fun? This doesn't have to be a tech project or work specific in general, but what's the most random thing you've built for fun?
Oh, that's a tough one. Most random thing I've built for fun. Um, I wouldn't call this like super random, but I had an itch like a couple years ago to get into woodworking and or get back into woodworking. I mean, I used to do a little bit of it when I was in high school, and I can't show it to you to be honest, but because it's being used right now, but I built like a monitor stand after I took this like woodworking course So it's like this like long plank of wood, and it has legs, and there's like a little shelf, and I was like sanding it down and meticulously shaping it, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, pretty boring answer, but
No, I'm super curious to know more about this, but I'd love to get the name of the place where you took this class because I used to do woodwork in high school as well,
okay.
except I never got to keep any of my pieces because they were school property. So I'd love to get one for
Damn, really?
myself
That's a
as well.
thing? That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it was.
Um, okay, yeah. It was at OCAD. They have like an intro to woodworking course. I think it's like a few $100. The instructor was like really awesome, and um, it was like it was literally like a little bit of theory in the beginning, and it was like pick a project and just start working on it, and it was a lot of fun. Highly recommend.
That's awesome.
Okay, if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, one on one, who would it be?
Oof. This is a tough one. Um, Anyone. Damn. I don't know. I'm drawing blanks. I'd probably want to like speak to like a historical figure or something. Maybe like a historical figure from like the Middle East or something. I was talking to my dad recently, actually. This is kind of mm, related to this, but um, my dad has been getting really obsessed with like tracing the lineage and ancestry of our last name. And we discovered that there is a like there's like an ancient king or ruler of Granada who has our last name, and he was like the a descendant of like several kings in that region, and I think the like last king to carry the name, um, I think like lost to the Christians and got exiled. So I'd probably want to talk to him and be like, "Hey man, what happened? Could have been in Spain."
I think that's a interesting track because even our last guest talked about wanting to meet Cyrus the Great. I think it was one of the
Oh wow.
philosopher kings of days gone by. But yeah, interesting
Hmm.
theme. Okay, what
Sure.
is your guilty pleasure tech tool or gadget that you just can't live without?
Um, Tech tool or gadget. iPhone is a bit of a cop-out answer. Everyone has some to some degree a an obsession with that. Um, maybe my Oura ring. Like I wear an Oura ring, and I kind of wear it generally to like, yeah, just track my biomarkers, but sometimes it is a nice flex to like wake up in the morning and see how low my resting heart rate is, gives me that dopamine spike. I'm like, yeah, I'm healthy. I'm an athlete. But yeah, I would say that's the one.
Yeah, I hope to get one someday as well. Okay, what is one app or tool you think is totally underrated that more people should be using?
You know, maybe I'll say Notion Mail, honestly. The reason I bring that up is because I was a superhuman uh like fanatic, you know. I I churned so many times, or like I tried to churn a couple times, um, and just like cancel the app because I mean ultimately it's a bit pricey, um, and I just found that I kept coming back to it. But Notion Mail came up, and I gave it a try, and I think it's really great. It's like super snappy. It feels really good. There's something about the way they've designed it that feels like I would say it feels snappier and faster than Superhuman, which is kind of ironic because I mean Superhuman's supposed to feel fast, right? That's their whole shtick. Um, but yeah, I think Notion Mail is the one. You got to check it out. Give it a
I
try.
definitely will, because for the past God knows how long, I've just been raw dogging Gmail and Outlook like directly.
I mean, I get it, man. I'm a purist as well. Like I think there is value in the Google Calendar and the Gmail, but yeah, give it a shot. I think you'll like it.
Okay, if you could instantly master any skill overnight, what would it be?
Can it be a skill that I'm currently developing, or does it have to be something new?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Honestly, I'm not gonna give like a tech answer or something like that. I think if I could master a skill, I would want to master drumming. I would want to be a better drummer just because um, it just gives me so much joy to be able to play. And there are a lot of songs that I wish I could play, and a lot of technique that I am still developing in my spare time. And I'd love to, I'd love to get those chops going. So yeah, drumming.
Very cool. Very cool. If you could go back and give advice to yourself when you were just starting out your tech career, what would you say?
When I was just starting out my tech career, I would probably like push myself to um trust in like the natural what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like the natural skills and the instincts that I already have, and not try to like push my career in a direction um because it sounds like it's a good direction, you know? I think I think especially when you're early in your career, you're young, all your peers are parroting certain narratives or views about what the ideal career looks like and what you should be doing and whether you should, work for this company or that company, or it's a good name, or that you should, this is a really great. There's like a lot of status games that come with that you can get swept up in, and I think I would have told my younger self to focus on the things that I naturally am good at and enjoy, and follow that instinct, build that intuition, instead of like trying to force something that doesn't feel right,
If your life was a movie, what would it be titled?
What would it be titled? Man, these are tough questions. um the Claude Father.
That's a great answer. Okay, last question. Probably the most important rapid fire question. Cats or dogs?
100% dogs, man.
A
100%.
shout out Oreo.
100%. My man Oreo, he's tucked away, in his bed and getting some rest. But yeah, I have a dog, and I love dogs. I've had dogs since I was like 16 or something. And I think they're amazing animals, and cats are great too. Cats are awesome. Not hating on cats, but dogs are awesome, and I'll take them any day.
Okay, with that, we come to the conclusion of this episode of Not a Minimum Viable podcast. Thank you for coming on. Before we end this episode, do you have any words of wisdom for anybody listening? Any advice?
I don't have any advice per se, but I would probably something I'm thinking about a lot is this idea that like you will get as far as you want in life based on how willing you are to like look stupid in front of other people and do things that make you look foolish, you know? Are you willing to be foolish? That's like a concept that I'm wrestling with, and I think that's probably something that maybe a lot of people might want to ask themselves and reflect on. And I think the more foolish you're willing to look, the more things you'll try and the more fun you'll have. So yeah,
Yeah, thank you for that. Being cringe is cool. Awesome.
there you go. That's a concise way of putting it. Yes, cringe is so back.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time. It was a lot of fun.